Welcome in, I'm Artress, and I know that I said I was going to be done making OP10 videos, but that was a lie. This is going to be the final video for OP10. I ended up playing in a Treasure Cup over the weekend, which was the last weekend for the OP10 meta before the EB02 meta takes over. And I ended up playing Usopp and finishing with a 7-2 record, which put me into the 21st spot. Bubbled out of top 16 just barely. I almost made it to top 8, but I lost my last round. But that's besides the point. Why am I making a video at the end of the OP10 meta about a deck list that I did well with in OP10? Well, there's a reason for that. I think even though we are shifting into an EB02 meta where we will see GP Luffy start to take over, I think that Usopp actually does pretty decent and is worth exploring, and we'll go over that in a bit after we explain the deck list choice and then what you could change later. But before we go over all of that, if you're new to the channel, please make sure to drop a sub. And if you enjoy the video, especially Usopp related content, please make sure to give the video a thumbs up. It helps out the channel so much. Thank you all for the support. Additionally, if you'd like to talk about the One Piece card game outside of the YouTube comments, make sure to join the Discord. The link for that is in the description below. So quickly going over this list here, I am running a very standard list with a few one-ofs. We have 4 Leo, which is going to be a staple for an Usopp deck, being able to search the top 5 and grabbing 2 Dressrosa type characters, or cards rather, is really important because of the fact that you are a combo-centric deck, and so being able to find those pieces to combo with is the key to success here. So 4 of is mandatory. The next up, we were running 3 Rebecca. So previously to this tournament, I was running 4 Rebecca, which I think is also a good option. Rebecca is great for filling up the trash here and being able to find some of the pieces outside of the 7-cost Rebecca that you can use to fill in some spots that you might be missing for some of your curve. Now, in addition that I put in for this specific tournament was 3 Gyats, and I was very skeptical of it at first because I have the alt arts for the one-legged toy soldier. I didn't want to switch those out. Very admittedly, I don't want to switch those out because this is actually one of my favorite alt arts in the game. But I felt like Gyats might be useful in some scenarios, and boy, did he overperform in my limb matchups, very specifically over the weekend. I think I actually played 1 limb. I said limb matchups, but only 1 limb. And in that matchup, he had where he dropped the 2 1-cost limbs that restand things, and the Gyats allowed me to attack the active characters, which is really important here, and probably the main reason why this is in the deck overall. I had seen a lot of people within the main Discord under the Usopp section talk about the Gyats being a good addition to the deck. Of course, like I said, I was skeptical, but over the weekend, I do understand it, although I will change it in a little bit. Running 3 Ideo, this is a very solid blocker, one of the most overperforming cards in the deck. Being able to play this down when you're going second on your first turn and then getting a draw off of it is very important. I'm going to be drawing with this all the time. When somebody swings into you, even if you can counter out, I feel like you should just block and draw, get that cycle going. I think that's very important. Most people run 4. I'm running 3 because I'm doing a 3-1 split between the Sabo and the Ideo. Sabo came up very clutch in some games. We'll get to that in a second. Next, the one-legged toy soldier. As I mentioned, I would like to have this at 4, so that's actually probably a change I'll make, but this is, I think, really important going into the EB02 meta, but in this meta more specifically, can be useful in some matchups, especially like against Shanks. Being able to play this down and then Kairos is very important for a lot of their 8 drops, getting you some tempo at least back when they do have a board starting to be built up. Running 4 Bartos, I feel like this is pretty standard here and probably a mandatory 2K at 4 of because of the fact it has blocker on it and it can be revived off of things like Frankie. Running 3 Sabo, just another 4-cost target that you can bring out with the 7-cost Rebecca. Super important to have plenty of options there. And the main effect here, being able to return itself if one of your cost 7 or lower characters would be removed by an effect, is also important in some matchups. Very specifically like Blackbeard, you can throw this down and it's hard for them to remove this and something else off the board. 3 Frankie, I see a lot of people running 4. I feel like Frankie's good in some scenarios, but he doesn't do a lot. He just sits there and obviously he can get things back like a Leo, a Rebecca, maybe some of the blockers, even a one-legged toy soldier, things like that out of the trash when he is KO'd. So that is important, but I'd rather be playing any of these 4 drops instead. So the 3 Zoros and the 4 Cavendish. Funny enough, I only saw Zoro out of like 9 rounds, like maybe 2 rounds I saw him total. So he didn't pop up too much. He is a very important card, and I'll look to increase him in the next EB02 meta. Cavendish here is probably the MVP, if not Kairos, for the entirety of the deck. Being able to draw 2 trash 1 is amazing for cycling your hand, getting deeper into the deck and finding the pieces you need for your combo. Also being able to fill up your trash in the meantime, so you're getting closer to King Kong gun range. So I feel like Cavendish did a lot of work. Most times when you're playing a thing like Zoro down and then you swing with it, your opponent's not going to want to swing into that to give you your ability. but they will want to swing into the Cavendish because of the fact that Cavendish will just draw you a lot of value over the course of a game. And I think that is incentive enough for your opponent to want to swing into this. Otherwise, you're going to have to use blockers because most people will just swing face if they're going against Usopp rather than the bodies. But Cavendish will prevent that from happening because people want this thing off. The 1-up Sabo came up a couple times during the tournament. I think that this is here for a couple reasons. If you're going against Purple Luffy, I think that there are a couple ways for them to close out a game if you go down to 0 life, which is easy for them to get you there because you are a 4-life leader. So being at 0 is very scary because they can rest your blockers like your Frankie, your Bartos, your Ideos with anything like an Usohachi or maybe even the 7-cost Sanji. But the Sabo is really important because of the +1 cost that your leader ability gives all of your characters, making this a 6 cost. So it puts it out of range of the Usohachi or anything that might rest 5 cost. They only have one option, and that'd be 7-cost Sanji. In my Lim matchup, this actually stuck to the field because a lot of what they have just rest 5 costs, and they could never rest this and get rid of it. I would swing with it if I ever rested it, or just hold it up for protection. And of course, being able to draw 2, trash 2, very important with this deck. Cycling a little bit deeper. It's a great play on 5, it's a great play on 6, so either of those options are good here. But also what's really good on 6 is the Secret Rare Luffy from this set, OP10. I think that this is a great card for a couple of reasons. It's really good into Pluffy, which will amass a really big hand size, and so being able to put cards at the bottom of your deck from your trash to make them discard is important. This came up 3 times total over the course of my matches, and it actually ended up happening in both Pluffy matches and a red-purple sugar match, which they like to keep cards in hand, and Pluffy also likes to keep cards in hand, so this came up at the right time during the tournament. So normally when I see this, it is a 1K, which is the most important thing here, is that you can just discard this if you don't need it. But I think that the fact that you can actually play it down off of this Rebecca, or you can play it down on 6 right before your Rebecca play, is super important and can be impactful. Of course, Rebecca, the 7 cost that draws you a card and then brings out a 7 and a 4, super, super important to find. Either you mulligan for this or you're trying to find it before you hit 7. It's a 1K counter as well, but typically you're not going to want to discard this unless you have a lot of counter in hand. Kairos, I think, is probably the best card in the deck outside of Cavendish because of the fact that it just bounces a 5 cost and can immediately swing into something. So that is important. And of course, if you couple this with the one-legged toy soldier, you can bounce an 8 cost. That came up a couple of times as well. I have 1-of Luffy. This I think I will never cut from an Usopp deck, no matter what people try to convince me. I think that this card in Rebecca wins you games, and so in Usopp can also win you games as well, just depending on the matchup, of course. I think that in some matchups like Shanks, it just never came down. It's really easy for them to get rid of, but in other matchups like maybe Bonnie, which is already kind of a favorable matchup for Usopp, it's a really good card to throw down as well. Unfortunately, the bane of the deck, we have 4 Colosseum. If this comes down early, you're in a really commanding spot. If it comes down late or not at all, you could be in a little bit of trouble. Being able to give your characters pseudo rush can only like attack into characters the turn they're played is very important. And of course, this Luffy being able to attack active characters the turn it's played means that it can attack into anything. And when you couple that with Gats, any character you play down that turn can attack active characters that same turn. Example is I played Cavendish down against Lim. I gave the Cavendish Gats ability so it can attack active, and then I was able to get my ability off to draw 2 trash 1 and also get cards out of the opponent's hand. So it was very good play, very good tempo swing, or at least it was an attempt to. I think they countered out anyway, but we got cards out of hand, which is really important, and then we ended up getting value out of it at the end of the day. And then the way that you close out a lot of games is with King Kong Gun, giving a character plus 6,000, a Dressrosa type character, mind you, 6,000, which we all have Dressrosa. It's nothing but Dressrosa in here, but just wanted to make that clear. This gives it 6,000 power and then double attack if you have 15 or more in trash, which you're filling up your trash the entire time with things like Rebecca or like Cavendish, or just like being able to discard, or like things going into the trash by like KOing. You're filling up your trash is the point, and so you can get to 15 rather easily, and then using this as a way to close out a game can take people by surprise. I think it's really important into the Shanks matchups because this card will give smaller things boosts that they didn't expect to have to counter out of. And so I think that this is a really important card for you to find. Early game, you can always toss this if you find it with Leo or have it in hand with Leo. But once you get towards the later stages of the game, if you can find one, try to hold on to it. I want to go over a couple of my matchups that I had over the course of the 9 rounds. I played against 2 Shanks, 2 Pluffy, 1 Teach, 1 Red Purple Sugar, 1 Red Green Smoker, 1 limb, and then I had 1 buy. And so I ended up actually playing a lot of decks that I'm unfavorable against, according to SimStats. Going against Ploofy and Shanks is always really difficult, but I managed to beat 1 Shanks, I lost to 1, and then the other loss I had was to Red Green Smoker. I ended up beating both Ploofys, which is a very hard task for this deck because of the fact that Ploofy just has a really good curve, and you can't really interact with a lot of their bodies once they start getting to the Luffy Taro stage of the game. Some quick tips for the Shanks matchup. I think that it's really important, obviously, to go first if you can. I think in most matchups you're wanting to go first, so I guess that's kind of a null point. But what I think is more important is trying to get a wide board. So it is very important to open with a Leo or a Rebecca. Kairos is going to be your savior in that matchup. In my first Shanks matchup, I only saw Kairos. I didn't see any of my combo pieces, so I had to go Kairos on my 7 and 9. And so I just had a leader swing and then 2 Kairoses, and that got me through that game with a King Kong gun, of course, but still, regardless, Kairos was hard carrying that matchup. You want to play your blockers early, you want to try to get searches, so just your typical gameplay, but unfortunately that matchup's really tough because they can just answer your bodies pretty easily, and then they're really aggressive with some things like 5-cost Luffy or even Dragon, so you kind of have to be careful of that, and all of your bodies outside of that are really easy for them to just pop with Lucky Roo, which most will find Lucky Roo if possible. So once again, Kairos is super important in that matchup. Onto the Ploofy matchups, I think it's important to find Zoro, because if you can find Zoro and you're going second, say you lose a dice roll, then you can play the Zoro down on 4, which will answer their Zoro Juro if they've played one down that turn, if that's like their optimal turn. And then from there, being able to at least hold out a turn, not take too much damage, and then get your combo off, your Rebecca, Kairos, whatever you want combo. Kairos being able to bounce back Sangoro is very important, and then swing into a body that's rested. For the most part with Ploofy though, you're going to want to go face, because if you try to swing into a body that's like a 6k body, it's more valuable for you to just go face and try to get more counter out that way and then wear them down. And then from there, the only time you're really ever attacking bodies is if you can calculate if you can get the body off the field, or if you have a character that can get the rush off the Coliseum, because there's no other reason to not swing if you have that free swing to get maybe more cards out. The Teach matchup was really close. They ended up seeing a really good curve going first. I think that they want to go second, but I think they gave me second, and I truthfully want to go second in this matchup because all of your on plays don't really matter. You're never using the 7-cost Rebecca as an on play effect. You're always just using it as a counter. If you can go second, try to find an Ideo or like some kind of searcher. The most important card in that matchup is Cavendish, which I ended up finding 3 of them, and I went Cavendish on 4, they pistoled it. I went Cavendish on 6, they pistoled it. And then on 8, I went Cavendish Sabo, and I was like, okay, try to get rid of it this time, and they couldn't. So it at least stuck that point, and I went really wide against them. I think I went like Leo, Rebecca, Cavendish, Zoro, and I think I had a Frankie, and so I was just swinging with all of the characters on board, including the 1-drops. Like Leo and Rebecca were getting in there from some action, putting some Dawn on them, swinging 5s, forcing them to try to take it off the board with their like Big Burgess, which is, it feels like a waste, right? It feels like a waste for them trying to get these smaller characters off the field, but if these things last, they don't run a lot of counter, and they can go down to 0 pretty quickly, and so that puts a lot of pressure on them to counter out when it matters the most. The Red-Green Smoker matchup was really close. I think it's a 50-50. I think that matchup can go your way. This one was really close. There's a couple things in the course of that match that I think impacted the overall result. A couple of those, one of them being they swung with their 5-cost Smoker, and I had a 2-2-1. I could counter out with either a 2 and a 1, which is probably the optimal play, but I countered out with 2 2Ks because the 1-cost or the 1K counter was a 7-cost Rebecca, and I was going into my Rebecca turn. And so I didn't want to pitch the only Rebecca that I had in hand because I had a Kairos ready to go, and I had, I think, a Cavendish. I was just looking for the Zoro, and I think that's the other part is I didn't see Zoro. Unfortunately, Zoro is really mandatory in that matchup because if you can go Rebecca, Kairos, Zoro, you can Zoro the Tashigi, and then you can bounce the Smoker back with the Kairos. Unfortunately, they had the Smoker and the Tashigi, and I couldn't get rid of the Smoker with the Kairos bounce, so I had to bounce the Tashigi back, and I ended up playing with another Cavendish. So I ended up having 2 Cavendish, a Kairos, and a Rebecca, which is still good, but they had that Smoker swing still sitting there, so that was really annoying. And eventually they dropped 2 8-cost kids behind another Tashigi, a Rosinante, and it was becoming Exodia at that point. Almost broke through. They swung for 16 to get lethal there, and I had 16 exactly. I was getting a lot of value off of the Cavendish over the course of the game, and when you're running 12 2Ks, you can counter out of a lot of stuff a lot easier once lethal situations present themselves. The Limb matchup was a war of attrition. They played a lot of the draw 3 trash 2 Enels. They had a pretty big hand size, which is rather unfortunate for me, but I ended up grinding through it. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, they had 2 of the 1-cost limbs, so they were able to restand whatever bodies they had put onto the field that turn. Quite annoying. I couldn't really interact with their board, so that's why I was playing Gats down to try to attack into the board and get cards out of hand, which ended up helping me close out games because by the time we got to late, they didn't have a lot of cards in hand, so I could actually push for lethal at that point in time. Then against Red Purple Sugar, I ended up taking first, and I didn't swing when they were on the 4-Dawn turn because I didn't want them to use their leader ability to ramp up to 5 to play a character down because they don't have a lot of 4-cost or 4-cost threats rather. And so I took a turn off to not swing in. They bricked up on not finding a 5-cost on time. And then after that, they dropped a dragon into a 10-cost Shanks. And when they were tapped out with the 10-cost Shanks, I ended up establishing this Luffy the turn before, or 2 turns before, and I had a Kairos. And so I was at 15 in trash at that point. They were tapped out, and I went Luffy King Kong Gun, swinging 13, making them discard 1. It hit both life, so they took both life, and then I went the rest on Kairos and won the game from that. So I just kind of like almost one-hit KO them from that combo, but it was close regardless. Red Purple Sugar being the 8th round opponent was pretty intimidating in the fact that it had made it that far with only losing 1 match. So that was pretty impressive overall. Overall though, Usopp is a very fun deck. I have played quite a lot of it over the course of OP10. If you can see on screen now, I've had where I record a lot of my matches, at least the results of them, so I can kind of see how different matchups have played out going first or second. And so over the course of 71 games over OP10, whether that's locals or regionals or treasure cups or side events or whatever it is, it's a combination of all of that. Ended up with a 69% win rate. That's very nice. And then on top of that, I think that some of the most important things here is that I've played a total of like 16 games against Shanks over the course of OP10, and I've kept that win rate around 56%, which is, I think, for what is considered an 80-20 in the favor of Shanks. I think that's pretty impressive, at least, to be able to have a winning record against probably the best deck in the format right now, and one that is really hard for Usopp to face up against. So, but with that all being said, how does Usopp change into the EB02 format? It's a very good question, and one that is probably very easy to solve here. So starting off the bat, I would probably remove a Gats and a Sabo and make these 2 one-legged toy soldiers, so an additional 2. I think cost reduction is going to be very important going into the GP Luffy meta. Being able to combat their stage ability is super important because they will try to pump their Sanji and putting up to 7 cost, and you just can't interact with that without some kind of cost reduction. The other thing I think I would want to try to do here is up the Zoro count to 4 and then move the Cavendish down to 3. Even though Cavendish is an amazing card, I think being able to answer bodies with the Zoro is super important here, and so being able to see Zoro more often than not, I think is mandatory in my opinion going into EB02. We're trying to beat Green Purple Luffy, and so that is the name of the game. How do you do that? You have to be able to reduce the cost of it and then be able to play out Zoro Juro, or at least have it in hand. And Kairos is also an important piece as well. So I think you'd want to swap the ratios here. And then the other piece that is super important in my opinion is finding a way to fit in Orlumbus. Orlumbus I think is going to be the main reason why this deck has any legs in EB02. Being able to give a character activating once per turn, -4 on the opponent's side of the field, and then KO one of your Dressrosa characters, then mill 2 cards. This card does it all. You're trying to fill up your trash. You have a lot of characters that are 1 cost, so it's easy to KO. Reduce something by -4 on the opponent's side, then play a Zoro and KO it, or bounce it back to hand with the Kairos. So you're getting a lot of tempo with the Orlumbus. I would look to run this at 3, maybe even 4. I think you're going to want to see this in a lot of matchups. So some of the things you can consider to take out, you might want to take out the 6-cost Luffy. As much as it hurts me to say, this card is good, but you don't necessarily need it to win. You might want to take out 1 Frankie and then have just 2 Frankie here, maybe bump Orlumbus up to 2 and find 1 more spot for him to be put into. I don't think you want to cut Sabo. You could. You might want to cut a Rebecca, but Rebecca also kind of does what Orlumbus is needing you to do as well, which is put a small character on the board you don't mind KOing, and then filling up your trash as well. So I don't know if I'd replace this per se, but definitely these 2 are cuttable, and then keeping Orlumbus at a 2 to 3, maybe even 4 could be necessary going into the EB02 meta. I'll be testing it out though over the course of the next couple of weeks because EB02 is only about a month. But keep on the lookout for the channel for an updated video on Usopp for EB02 because I think that there's a way to make this meta and have it be better than people give it credit for. So there you have it. That's a wrap for Usopp for OP10. I'm excited to cook with him a little bit more over the next month. Make sure to stay tuned to the channel for that. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.